fast lanes and frayed hearts. "You've got to be kidding me," Naylor Grant muttered, her eyes scanning the bustling street of Edgewood as she searched for a parking spot. The neon lights of the restaurant blinked in the distance, promising a night of mediocrity. She sighed, her grip tightening on the steering wheel of her beloved Camaro. This is definitely going to be one of those nights. Pauline, her best friend since college, chuckled from the passenger seat. "Come on, Nye. Live a little. It's just a Groupon dinner. What's the worst that could happen?" Naylor shot her a look that clearly said, "You really want to go there." But she kept her thoughts to herself. They hadn't seen each other in weeks, and she wasn't going to start their reunion with a fight. Plus, she owed Pauline big time for helping her move into her new place. A little loud music and overpriced drinks weren't going to kill her. Or so she hoped. They finally found a spot and wove their way through the crowd into the restaurant, the thumping bass line of the latest hip-hop track rattling the walls. Naylor felt like a fish out of water in her jeans and t-shirt, surrounded by a sea of designer clothes and carefully coiffed hair. She spotted a couple of familiar faces, but they were lost in their own conversations, their eyes glazed over with the promise of a weekend free from work. Summary: 1. Naylor Grant, a lesbian who prefers studs, is dealing with potential job loss and her parents' life changes. She's at a loud, trendy Edgewood restaurant with her friend Pauline, using a Groupon. The atmosphere is overwhelming, and Naylor feels out of place amidst the fancy crowd. "You know, I think we're the only lesbians in here without a dog," Pauline yelled over the music, her voice thick with sarcasm. Naylor rolled her eyes. The only thing she had in common with these people was the neighborhood they lived in. She liked her women like she liked her cars, fast, powerful, and unapologetically butch. But here she was, about to spend her Friday evening in a place where the menu probably had more gluten-free options than actual food. As they approached the hostess stand, Naylor couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Maybe tonight wouldn't be so bad after all. Maybe she'd find someone who could take her mind off the impending doom of unemployment. Or maybe she'd just get drunk and race her way out of here, leaving the pretentiousness in a cloud of exhaust fumes. Either way, she was ready for whatever the night had in store, or so she thought. The hostess, a bubbly blonde with too much makeup, handed them a couple of menus and led them to a table that was just a little too close to the speakers for comfort. The music pounded in Naylor's chest, setting her teeth on edge. But she took a deep breath and promised herself she'd make the best of it. For Pauline. For the free meal. And maybe, just maybe, for herself. Summary: 1. Naylor feels out of place at the crowded, trendy restaurant with Pauline, who points out the lack of lesbians without dogs. Despite her preferences for butch partners, Naylor is open to the possibility of a distraction from her troubles. The hostess seats them near the speakers, adding to Naylor's discomfort, but she decides to enjoy the night for her friend and the free meal. The first few minutes at the table were spent shouting over the music, trying to decide what to order. Naylor's eyes kept drifting to the bar, where a group of women had gathered, all of them dressed in clothes that screamed, "I'm too good for this place," or at least, that's what Naylor hoped they were screaming. Because if they were actually enjoying themselves, she was going to have to seriously reevaluate her life choices. But then, she saw her. The woman from the parking lot. The one who had looked at Naylor like she was a steak and she was a hungry lioness. She was leaning against the bar, sipping on something pink and fizzy, her eyes scanning the room. And when they landed on Naylor, they lingered. Naylor felt a jolt of something she couldn't quite place: desire, curiosity, fear. Whatever it was potent. And it was definitely not what she had expected from a night out with Pauline. But as the femme started making her way over, Naylor couldn't deny that she was intrigued. The woman slid into the booth opposite Naylor with the grace of a seasoned pro. "Hi, I'm Scotty," she said, her voice a low purr that seemed to cut through the din. "I hope you don't mind me joining you." Summary Carrot 1. At the crowded restaurant, Naylor notices a femme from the parking lot who had caught her eye earlier. Scotty approaches their table and introduces herself, joining them despite the noise, and Naylor feels a mix of attraction and surprise, considering her usual preference for butch partners. Naylor's mind raced. Scotty was everything she never went for: feminine, dressed to kill, and looking for all the world like she belonged in this place. But as she took in the way Scotty's eyes sparkled with mischief, she felt a strange pull. Like maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of trouble she needed in her life. Pauline, ever the wing woman, slid out of the booth. "I'm gonna go grab another drink." "You two have fun," she shouted before disappearing into the crowd. Scotty leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that made Naylor's skin prickle. "So, what's a tough girl like you doing in a place like this?" Naylor swallowed hard. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, her voice coming out more flirty than she had intended. Scotty smirked. "I like to keep things interesting." She reached across the table and placed a hand over Naylor's. "And I have a feeling you're about to make my night very interesting indeed." The touch was electric, sending a jolt straight to Naylor's core. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Scotty's smug face. "What makes you say that?" "Oh, I can just tell." Scotty winked. "I have a knack for spotting a woman who needs a little excitement." Naylor felt her heart thud in her chest. Was she really going to do this? Date a femme? But before she could protest, Scotty was already leaning closer, her breath hot on Naylor's cheek. Summary Carrot 1. As Scotty joins them, Naylor feels an unexpected attraction despite her usual preferences. Pauline leaves for a drink, and Scotty whispers seductively, hinting that she finds Naylor intriguing. The physical contact leaves Naylor questioning whether she might be willing to consider dating a femme. "Let's get out of here," Scotty murmured, her voice a siren's call. "I know a place where we can really talk." And just like that, Naylor found herself saying yes. Because if there was one thing she knew, it was that she was about to take a wild ride, and she had no intention of letting anyone else drive. Title: Fast Lanes and Frayed Hearts. The air was thick with anticipation as Naylor followed Scotty out of the restaurant, her heart racing like the engine of her prized Camaro. The music faded into the background as the cool night air hit her face, a stark contrast to the sticky atmosphere inside. She took a deep breath and told herself to stay in control. She didn't do relationships with femme. But the way Scotty's hand felt in hers, the confidence in her stride, and the promise in her eyes, it was all too tempting to resist. Scotty led Naylor down the street, past the trendy boutiques and art galleries, to a dimly lit speakeasy tucked away in an alley. The door was unassuming, but once inside, Naylor was hit with the sweet scent of whiskey and the smooth sound of jazz. The place was intimate, with plush velvet booths and low lighting that made it easy to lose track of the outside world. They sat in the back, the plush velvet of the booth enveloping them like a cocoon. The conversation flowed easily, with Scotty telling stories that had Naylor laughing until her sides ached. It had been so long since she'd felt this alive, so long since she'd felt anything at all. But as the night went on, Naylor couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Scotty than met the eye. The way she spoke about her past was like flipping through the pages of a book, revealing snippets of a story without ever truly diving in. And every time Naylor tried to ask a question that was too personal, Scotty would change the subject with a sly smile. As they sipped on their drinks, Naylor felt a growing sense of unease. What was it about Scotty that had her so intrigued yet on edge? Was it the secret she could feel lurking beneath the surface, or was it the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about herself all along? The bartender slid over a fresh round of drinks, the clinking of ice echoing through the quiet space. Naylor took a sip, the vodka burning a trail down her throat. So, why me? She asked, unable to keep the question at bay any longer. Scotty leaned back, her eyes never leaving Naylor's. You looked like you needed a break from the world, she said. And I like a challenge. Naylor scoffed. I'm not a challenge, she said, her voice firm. But even to her own ears, it sounded like a lie. Because deep down, she knew she was. With her walls up and her heart locked away, she was the last person anyone should bet on. Scotty's hand reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from Naylor's face. We'll see, she said, her voice low and seductive. But for now, let's just enjoy the night. The touch was featherlight, but it was enough to set Naylor's pulse racing. She knew she should pull away, tell Scotty that this was a mistake. But as she felt the warmth of her hand against her cheek, she found herself leaning into it instead. The hours slipped away, the conversation weaving from light-hearted banter to deep, soul-bearing confessions. Naylor talked about her love for racing, the roar of the engine beneath her, the feeling of speed and power that nothing else could match. Scotty, in turn, spoke of her passion for art, how she'd painted her way through a string of bad relationships, each stroke on the canvas a release of pain and anger. As the night grew darker, their connection grew stronger. And when Scotty leaned in, her lips brushing against Naylor's, it was like the world around them had stopped. Naylor's breath caught in her throat as she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, desire. They stumbled out of the speakeasy, the music and laughter following them into the alley. The air was cool, but the heat between them was palpable. Naylor's hand was still in Scotty's, their fingers entwined like they had been for hours. And as Scotty leaned in for another kiss, Naylor felt her resolve slipping away. She didn't do this, she didn't get involved with fam. But something about Scotty was different. Something that made her want to throw caution to the wind and see where the night took them. The alley was empty, the only sound the distant wail of a siren. Scotty pressed Naylor against the brick wall, her mouth demanding and hungry. Naylor's body responded in kind, her hands finding their way under Scotty's shirt, her palms skimming over soft, warm skin. It was a dance they hadn't practiced, but they moved together as if they'd been doing it for years. Scotty's hands found the button of Naylor's jeans, deftly unhooking them. Naylor gasped as her hand slid inside, her fingertips brushing against the damp fabric of her underwear. She was wet, and it had nothing to do with the sticky summer night. Is this okay? Scotty whispered, her breath hot against Naylor's ear. Naylor nodded, unable to form words. The anticipation was too much, the need too great. She wanted Scotty, needed her in a way that scared her. But she wasn't about to let fear ruin this moment. Scotty's touch was gentle yet firm, her fingertips teasing Naylor's clit in a rhythm that made her legs tremble. Naylor's own hand found Scotty's zipper, her heart racing as she pulled it down. The sound of fabric sliding apart was lost in the symphony of their panting breaths. Scotty's hand slid into Naylor's pants, her fingers delving deep. Naylor gripped the wall, her eyes squeezed shut, as waves of pleasure crashed over her. The alley spun, the bricks cold and rough against her back, but it was Scotty's touch that anchored her. The world outside the alley was forgotten as their bodies moved together, the only thing that mattered was the friction and heat building between them. It was raw and primal, a connection that surpassed anything Naylor had ever felt before. But even in the throes of passion, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Scotty wasn't telling her. Something that could change everything. As they stumbled back to Naylor's Camaro, their clothes askew and their breaths still ragged, Naylor felt a pang of doubt. Could she handle whatever secret Scotty was keeping? Could she trust her heart to a woman who was the complete opposite of what she usually desired? But as Scotty looked at her with those piercing blue eyes, Naylor knew she was in too deep to turn back now. They were on the fast lane to something, and she could only hope it wouldn't lead to a crash. The engine roared to life, the vibrations resonating through Naylor's body as they peeled out of the alley. The wind in their hair, the smell of gasoline in the air, it was a feeling she knew well. But this time, it was different. This time, she had someone beside her, holding her hand tightly, sharing in the rush. Their future was uncertain, but in that moment, all Naylor knew was that she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, as long as she had Scotty by her side. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and racing hearts. Naylor and Scotty's connection grew stronger with every shared secret, every touch, and every night spent exploring each other's bodies. They were two opposites who somehow fit together perfectly, like the high-octane fuel and the sleek engine of Naylor's cherished Camaro. But as much as Naylor tried to ignore the whispers of doubt, they grew louder with every passing day. Her job was still in limbo, and the stress of her parents' impending move was a constant weight on her shoulders. And then there was Scotty, beautiful, enigmatic Scotty, who seemed to have secrets that could shatter their burgeoning relationship like glass. One evening, as they sat on the hood of Naylor's car, watching the sunset over the city skyline, Scotty finally broke the silence. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight with nerves. Naylor's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. "I was married," Scotty confessed, her eyes downcast. "To a man." Naylor's mind reeled. Married. A man. This was not the revelation she'd been expecting. But she took a deep breath, reminding herself that she'd promised to stay the course. And so, she waited for Scotty to continue, her heart in her throat. Scotty's exhale was shaky as she spoke. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city. "One I've been paying for ever since. But it's over now. I'm out. And I'm with you." Naylor searched Scotty's eyes, looking for any sign of deceit. But all she saw was raw vulnerability. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, trying to keep the accusation out of her tone. Scotty shrugged. "I didn't think it was relevant. I've moved on from that part of my life." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Naylor nodded, swallowed hard. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." The tension between them was palpable as they drove back to Naylor's place. The radio played softly, but the music couldn't fill the gap that had formed. Naylor's mind raced with questions, but she kept them to herself. For now, she needed to process this new piece of the puzzle that was Scotty. Inside, the silence was almost deafening. They sat on the couch, the distance between them seemingly insurmountable. Naylor's hand hovered over the remote, unsure what to do. "Do you want to watch something?" she asked, her voice strained. Scotty nodded, but her eyes never left Naylor's. "Yeah," she said. "But not TV." And with that, she leaned in and kissed her again, a kiss that was full of apology, full of hope. Naylor felt the doubt begin to melt away. Maybe this was it, maybe this was the real Scotty, the one who was ready to share all of herself. They ended up in bed, their bodies tangled in a mess of passion and confusion. Naylor's fears were forgotten as Scotty's soft whispers and gentle touches calmed her racing thoughts. This was something she had never felt before, this all-consuming need for a person who was nothing like what she'd always wanted. But as she lay there, heart still pounding in her chest, she knew she had to face the truth. She was falling for a fan, and she wasn't sure she knew how to handle it. The next morning, Naylor woke up with a start, the reality of her situation slapping her in the face like a cold shower. The sun streamed in through the open blinds, casting bars of light across Scotty's sleeping form. Naylor stood at her, her mind racing with all the ways this could go wrong. But as she watched Scotty's chest rise and fall with each breath, she felt a warmth spread through her, pushing aside the doubt. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. Maybe it was time to leave the fast lane of her old life behind and try a new road. The name of their story came to her in a moment of clarity, Fast Lanes and Frayed Hearts. It was a fitting title for the chaotic whirlwind that had become her life. But as she watched Scotty stir and smile sleepily up at her, she realized that even with the looming layoff and her parents' impending move, she had something to hold onto. Something that made the future seem a little less daunting. The next few days were a mix of job hunting and secret rendezvous with Scotty. Naylor found herself torn between the need to be responsible and the desire to just lose herself in the warmth of Scotty's arms. But every time she started to slip into despair, Scotty was there, her touch a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone. And every time they parted, Naylor felt a little more like herself, like maybe she could conquer the world, or at least the next curve in the road. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of Naylor's living room, she decided it was time to confront the elephant in the room. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady. Scotty looked at her, eyes searching. "Now we figure it out," she said. "Together." The promise in Scotty's voice was enough to make Naylor's heart soar. They were in this together, and she had never felt more alive. The future was uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they could conquer anything. And so, they set forth on their journey down the uncharted roads of love, hearts racing and engines revving. Fast lanes and frayed hearts had only just begun. The story unfolded like a wild ride down their fast lanes and frayed hearts highway, a name that encapsulated the tumultuous journey of Naylor and Scotty. The name whispered of the thrill of the unexplored and the fragility of their hearts, which had been tested by the relentless speed of life. As Naylor navigated the unemployment maze and Scotty faced the shadows of her past, their love grew stronger, a beacon in the dark. Naylor's job search felt like racing in circles, but with each passing day, she found solace in the quiet moments with Scotty. Their bond grew with every shared laugh, every whispered confession. And when Naylor finally landed an interview with a promising tech startup, it was Scotty who helped her pick out the perfect outfit, who held her hand tight as they drove through the early morning traffic. The interview was a blur of handshakes and whiteboards, but the adrenaline of knowing Scotty was waiting for her outside kept Naylor sharp. She walked out with the promise of a call, and when it came, she took it in the car, her heart racing like the engine of her beloved Camaro. The job was hers. They celebrated with a night out, the city lights a glittering backdrop for their victory lap. Naylor felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders as Scotty spun her around, their laughter echoing in the quiet streets. But as they settled into a quiet booth in a diner, the shadow of doubt crept back in. "What if it's all just too much?" Naylor asked, her voice barely a whisper. Scotty took her hand, her gaze steady. "We'll fix the phrase as we go," she said. Together. Their love story was no fairy tale, but it was theirs, filled with the roar of engines and the tender whispers of hearts finding refuge in the chaos. As Naylor started her new job, she knew the race was just beginning. But with Scotty in the passenger seat, the destination didn't matter, it was the thrill of the journey that made her heart race. And she was ready to drive into the sunrise of whatever lay ahead. The following weekend, Naylor's parents made the move to Florida. The house she'd grown up in was now empty, a stark reminder of the life she'd left behind. But when Scotty offered to help her pack up the last of her childhood memories, she found comfort in the strength of their joined hands, the promise of a future together. As they stood in the driveway, the U-Haul loaded with her parents' life, Naylor felt a pang of sadness. But then Scotty leaned in, her lips pressing softly against hers, and the world fell away. "This is just the start of a new chapter," Scotty murmured. And with a squeeze of her hand, they turned the page together. Life threw more curves than the back roads they took on their weekend drives, but Naylor and Scotty faced each one with the fierce determination that had brought them together. The fast lanes of their lives remained thrilling, but now they had each other to hold onto, through every heart-stopping moment and every gentle curve of the road ahead. The name of their story grew to define them, fast lanes and frayed hearts. It was a constant reminder of the speed at which their lives had collided and the delicate threads that held them together. Yet, even as the world around them moved at a breakneck pace, their love remained steady, a beacon guiding them through the twists and turns of fate. One evening, as they sat in the garage, surrounded by the scent of gasoline and the soft purr of Naylor's Camaro, Scotty looked at her with a spark in her eyes. "Let's take her out," she suggested, a hint of mischief in her voice. Naylor couldn't resist the thrill of the open road, the wind in her hair, and the chance to push their limits together. They raced into the night, the tires screeching against the asphalt as they hit every turn. The wind rushed past them, a symphony of freedom that made their hearts pound in time with the engine. In that moment, with the city lights blurring into a distant memory, Naylor knew that she had found something real, a love that could handle the speed and the occasional flat tire of life. As they pulled into the driveway, adrenaline still coursing through their veins, they shared a look that spoke of more than just the thrill of the chase. It was a look of understanding, of partnership in this wild ride they'd embarked upon. And as they tumbled into bed, breathless and smiling, Naylor whispered, "To fast lanes and frayed hearts," and Scotty echoed, "Forever." The days grew shorter, but their passion never waned. The chill in the air brought a sense of urgency to their love, a reminder that nothing in life was guaranteed. They clung to each other, finding warmth in their shared embrace as the leaves outside turned to gold and fell like confetti to the ground. The whispers of the coming winter couldn't fill the heat between them. They spent their nights exploring each other, discovering new facets of desire and love. And in the quiet moments, when the world outside was frozen still, they talked of dreams and fears, stitching the frayed edges of their hearts together into something stronger, something beautiful. The secret Scotty had revealed lingered in the background, a shadow that neither could ignore. But as they faced it head-on, they found that it only made their bond more unbreakable. They were two souls, racing through the dark, but together, they had found the light. The future was a horizon line that grew clearer with every day that passed. Naylor knew that the race wasn't over, that there would be more obstacles to face, more curves in the road. But with Scotty by her side, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The story of fast lanes and frayed hearts was far from over, but as they stood together, the city skyline a canvas of possibility before them, Naylor knew that she had found a love that could conquer any speed bump the world threw their way. Their hearts raced, not just from the thrill of the fast lane, but from the excitement of their shared future. They were ready to conquer the world, or at least the stretch of highway that lay before them, hand in hand, hearts open and engines revving.